Fiction Network podcast, and we are picking up today with Chapter 17. I was just drifting off when I heard Jay stop the story and speak in a low voice. Don't tell Jess about those mini stories I told you yesterday. She can be rather sensitive about them. I could hear the grin in his voice. Dave giggled. Okay. What mini stories? I asked, cracking my eyes open and keeping my voice quiet and rigid. My friend jumped. What? I didn't say anything about mini stories, he said, but his innocent look failed him. I kept my gaze firmly on him. I merely entertained Dave and Stella with a few anecdotes that have already gotten overlooked or might as we continue. Nothing big. I raised an eyebrow at him. Then why would you think I would be sensitive about them? Because they're all about you doing rather, Do I? I asked, amused to see Jay sputtering and knowing it wouldn't last long. Yeah, when you do stupid-ish things. Stupid-ish? Yes, he said defensively, or I suppose just plain stupid. I wasn't entirely sure what he was referring to and wasn't sure I wanted to, but I asked anyway. What times were those? Well, like the time you asked Mick if he waltzed with you at dinner. I only partially remembered that, considering it had been one of the few times we'd let loose with alcohol. Both ale and harder spirits had been in abundance as a donation of sorts from a merchant we'd helped. I discovered just how low a tolerance I had after almost 2 years of absolutely nothing. And when you ran into Iris carrying the pail of meat sauce and she chased you around the caverns for over an hour. I cringed. That one I remembered far too clearly. That was an accident. I have more, he said brightly. Dave, cursed the kid, was giggling like mad. I get the idea, I said. You asked for it. Yeah, well, remind me to never do that again. Don't ever do that again, he said solemnly. It's not what I meant, and you know it. You told me to remind you, so I did. Do I need to again? Because I could say, at this point, Stella clapped a hand over his mouth, amused. All right, Jay, we get the point. He pried it off. You do? Are you sure? Yes, positive. So when should I remind her? When she does it again. Is she doing it now? Stella favored him with an impatient look. How about now? James Doll. He sat up straight, all but snapping to attention. Yes, Stell? He asked meekly. I ducked my head so he couldn't see my grin. Dave was still laughing. Please just continue with the story. Should I remind her now? Jay! This time he did salute. I snickered. One story, coming right up, ma'am. Crossing the first road took no time at all. It was deserted. Beau paused halfway across and scanned the ground, muttering to himself. He straightened, a dark cloud passing across his face. Let's go, he said, words clipped. The three women exchanged a nervous glance, and Jay's own nerves spiked at Beau's anger, but he kept his mouth closed. He wasn't worried about Beau himself, but what it might mean. It only took a little while longer to reach the second road, which was just as deserted as the first. Beau motioned that it was safe, and the five scampered onto the road and began strolling casually towards Westcorner. Not that there was anyone around to be fooled. Just act natural, Beau murmured as they reached the first outlying houses. Then Jay should have the easiest time of it, Rye quipped. He glared at her back. Ha ha, Rye, you are such a comedian. I like to think so. Jessie stepped between them. Settle down, kids. Beau sighed. My mistake. Don't act natural. Act your parts. Jez giggled quietly as they entered the town proper. Jessie took the lead, heading straight for the town's smaller inn, a place called the Wallowing Swan. Excuse me, she said to the bartender, the only person present, as they entered. May we book 2 rooms, please? Of course, ma'am. Just step over here and we'll get you sorted, he said, moving to the end of the bar. Jessie stepped over him to go through the ritual of paying, while Jay and the others studied the room. It was rustic, but retained a small, comfortable feel to it. In one wall was a large fireplace, unneeded on such a summer day. Tables sat in a neat pattern, lined with benches, and a small sprig of flowers adorned each one, adding a homey touch. Jay clued back in as the bartender in question spoke. You'll have rooms 15 and 16, ma'am, he said, passing Jessie the keys, one of which she immediately handed to Beau. Much obliged. Meal times? We're slow right now, so whenever you want something, just let me know, or my husband know, and we'll make it right up for you. That's wonderful. Jessie now leaned forward as if imparting some great secret. Jay was well able to guess what came next and continued to look around, bored. My friend Jameson, she gestured towards Jay, is a bit... Well, look, I'm sorry if he causes any trouble, but he just doesn't pay attention. It won't be on purpose, I assure you. Pay him no mind. Not a problem, the man said. People around these parts are pretty laid back. He should have no problems. Wonderful. And our rooms are located down the hall, up the stairs, and to the right. Last 2 rooms. Thank you, sir, she said with a smile, and led the others down the hall. Beau and Jay's room was simple, but perfect for their purposes. 2 twin beds, a small sturdy desk, closet, and dresser. The two tossed their bags on a bed and then joined the women down next door in their room, which was only different in that it contained 2 sets of bunks instead of single beds. Rye, Jay, and Jessie settled on one of the bottom bunks, with Bo and Jez across from them. Jay felt like a naughty kid about to get a lecture from his parents. Rye didn't seem to feel the same, swinging her legs. "What's the plan?" Rye asked. "Jay, I want you to wander. Keep your ears open and eyes peeled. See what you can find out. You're our best bet if someone is, for any reason, onto us." Jay tossed him a loose salute. "Do you expect them to be?" Jez asked. "No, we've never had troubles before, but..." He pursed his lips and then shrugged. "I don't know, just got a funny feeling." He shook himself. "Anyway, Jez will be sticking with me for obvious reasons, plus she might pick up something I might miss. We'll spend our time at the other end mostly, because that's where our contact is supposed to meet us. Rye and Jessie, just act like you're new to the area. Country folk. We want to encourage the idea that Jessie's in charge of the group." "Got it." "What sort of funny feeling?" Jez asked quietly. He glanced between them. "It's just, ever since we hit the road." He pounded his fist into his knee in what even Jay could guess was a rare gesture of angry frustration. "I don't know. What the hell are the 3 doing to our country? There was no one on the roads today. Sure, I've pretty much stayed in and around Cavern Hall since they took over, but I had plenty of travel before that. Never did I get past or on main roads as easily as today. How many people did we see?" "None," Jessie murmured, even if they were all aware it was a rhetorical question. "Exactly. At this point, they'll oust themselves." "Which can't be a terrible thing." "No, except they'll run tear into the ground first. Elia and Neris are having a field day with our borders. Towns like Avonlea are under Narian control. Our economy is stalling, and without intervention will undoubtedly fail." He let out a breath, forcing his fingers to unclench. "I guess the main question is, are we being set up? Are Opalyn and Dakimar really that useless as rulers? Is this trip a waste of time?" "That's 3 questions, Bo, that are probably not related," Jess said gently, considering they all understood his feelings. "Discussing it like this is stupid. We don't know the answers and aren't going to," Rye grumbled, bringing all 4 heads around to look at her. "What we can do is focus on the job at hand and make sure we do it. I don't blame you for letting it get you down, Bo. Opalyn and Dakimar are bastards through and through. We all agree on that. But we will bring them down and put a competent ruler on the throne. Nothing bad will happen to anyone else." Jay was the first to notice the angry tears before she swiped at them. "Hey, Rye, it's okay. Honest, we'll get the bastards. You're right. We'll get 'em good," he said, patting her knee as Jessie put an arm around her. Rye buried her face in her best friend's shoulder, obviously embarrassed. "Rye?" "Yeah?" Her voice was a bit muffled. "Why do you feel so strongly? I know I can't and don't really talk about my past, but if you don't mind me asking," Jez said. Rye sat up but didn't make eye contact with any of them. "My parents deserted my brother and me when we were pretty little. He was only 3 and I was 6. We lived on the streets of Greensward from then on. Opalyn spent a lot of time there, in the years leading up to the coup, when no one really knew him except those who knew his father's business. By the time Bean, my brother, was 10. Even he was pretty savvy on the streets after 7 years, and he was a fair pickpocket." She swiped at her eyes. "I had told him, time and again, not to go near the merchant district. Sure, they'd bring in a good haul, but they were more alert to dangers. They knew better than anyone the value of their money." Rye hunched over, digging the palms of her hands into her eyes. Jay barely remembered to breathe. "He went anyway. It was a festival, and I had a real job working at one of the booths, so I wasn't watching him. A friend, another street kid, told me who, told me how. Guess Bean tried to pick his pocket, and Opalyn caught him, took the law into his own hands with a knife to the gut. Bean didn't stand a chance, and then he just walked away. I had no idea it would be the same person, but when I heard about the freedom fighters, I knew it was right, and I could help, so I joined." Jay's heart went out to her. He understood well the pain she felt. Bean had obviously been her other half in much the same way that Brighton had always been his. Maybe even more so, since it had just been the 2 of them for so long. A minute stretched into 2, and then Rye stood, still without ever looking at them. "I need some time," she said, and fled the room. I'm sorry," Jez said, stricken. "I didn't mean to." "It's not your fault, Jez. Rye's very protective of her past. If she hadn't wanted to tell you, she wouldn't have. But it also hits her hard, because she still feels like she let Bean down, that she should have been with him." This was obviously not a news story to Jessie. Bo shook his head. Those 3 will pay for all the hurt and pain they've caused." "But it'll never make up for it," Jay said, fighting the surge of anger. "It would do him no good at the moment. Trust me, I know, but it will prevent shit like that and what happened to me and all of us from happening again or to someone else. We'll be doing the world a favor when we get rid of him." His announcement elicited nods out of all of them. "Let's get to it. Keep your eyes open for Rye as you go. I want to make sure she's okay," Bo said. "I just have to ask. Jess said, putting a hand on her boyfriend's arm to keep him down. Jessie, is your past horrible? She smiled faintly. Oh no, my parents are both still alive, and I never had siblings. Bo frowned. Okay, now you've got my curiosity piqued. I don't usually ask, but most people do have past similar to Jay or Rye. My parents and I have never seen eye to eye on much about anything. When I had the gall to start speaking out against the practice of some of the merchants, including those my parents routinely did business with, they were not pleased. They were even less pleased for me to show off that I had a brain in public. I was told repeatedly to be quiet and let things lie. I thought that sounded incredibly stupid. I was looking for a way out and away, and came upon it when I met one of Bo's scouts. When out drinking, I let loose my complaints and moved out the next day to Cavern Hall. I send my parents a letter about once a year to let them know I'm alive, but they've all but disowned me at this point. Can't marry off a daughter living in a hole somewhere. The captain smiled. Well, we're glad to have you, no matter how. And then he sighed. All right, let's see what we can discover before the sun goes down. We'll meet back here for dinner. The four headed downstairs. Jessie peeled away to bend the bartender's ear, while Jay ambled out just ahead of Bo and Jez. Jez patted his shoulder as they headed down the street towards Westcorner's other inn. Jay spotted the man with the cows heading his way out of the corner of his eye, purposely didn't look, and stepped out in front of them anyway. Hey! Hey, you! The man called. Jay blinked around and then just looked at the man expectantly. The man gave him an exasperated look and gestured at the cows. Hello, you don't just walk out on the street like that when things are coming. You'll get yourself run over. He nodded agreeably. Okay, sure. What do you think it'd be like to be run over by cows? What it'd be like? The man repeated incredulously, staring at him. Why, what kind of question is that? You've never thought about it? Being stepped on by cows or any large animal hurts. Are you daft? The man demanded. Jay shrugged. Everyone looks at the world differently, he said serenely, patting a cow on the nose before strolling off, leaving the man sputtering in his wake. Jez rolled her eyes at Jay's antics and turned to Bo as they continued down the street. Who are we looking for? I shouldn't have exploded like that. It was irresponsible of me. It happens, Bo, and it was barely an explosion. It shouldn't happen to me, not when I'm out and in charge. That's exactly the reason why it should happen. With only a few small exceptions, we've been holed up in Cavern Hall since before the three took over. Sure, we know from the reports what's happening around here, but we haven't had the opportunity to witness it with our own two eyes until now. It makes sense it would hit hard now that we can see it. We're your friends, Bo. If you're not allowed to explode on occasion in front of us, who else do you have? She smiled. Mick? He had to live with you for a long time. I'm sure he's happy to pass the burden along. So forget it. It's done, over, and no harm sustained. Rye's right. We need to focus on the task at hand. Deal? Bo hesitated. Anyway, if anything, it's my fault Rye ran off because I pushed her. But, he started, but I realize there's nothing I can do about it right now, so we move on, and I'll apologize next time I see her. Simple as that. Do we have ourselves a deal? He smiled ruefully. Deal. Thanks for the pep talk, he said, putting an arm around her shoulders. I try to be multi-talented. You succeed very well. She rolled her eyes. I wasn't kidding. Neither am I, he murmured, eyes sparkling as he leaned in and kissed her. I'm a very lucky man to be able to do that. You bet your ass you are. They arrived outside the larger inn, the Hog's Heel, a respectable enough place despite the not-so-appealing name. Jez went to find them a seat while Bo approached the bartender and struck up a brief conversation. He joined her a couple minutes later, scooting a mug in her direction. Ordered us both the house ale. Hope you don't mind. Not at all, she raised in a toast. Here's hoping it's half good. Anything will be half good after the usual crap we managed to turn up. When we turned it up at all, Jez agreed wryly and took a sip, smiling with pleasure. So? Apparently we're here early or our contact is late. No sign of him yet. The barkeep says he hasn't been in. He knows? The man's a local. Adds credence and respectability to his story if he's just coming home to visit his mom. As good as this ale tastes, I assume we're not going to spend all our time here. Figured we'd have a drink a day, keep an eye out, and spend the rest of the time wandering town playing tourist. We don't want to raise too much suspicion, and our barkeep friend will let the contact know we've been hanging about. We need to make it sound plausible for us to hang around if it takes him a few days. Makes sense? So glad you approve, he said dryly and leaned forward. What do you think of Jay? I have to say, I like him. It seems like so much more time has passed since he joined us. He makes knowing him easy, and his teasing of Jessie never fails to crack me up. I suppose we'll see how his fighting skills are. I've heard he's proficient with a sword, but a dead shot with a bow and arrow, much like you. He used to train with another kid about his own age, and that kid was good with a sword. Jay figured the best way to beat him was to be better at something else. Smart idea. I used to do things like that with my brothers all the time, especially Colin. Yeah, I'll have Reardon test him out and see where his skills lie once we're back home. If he's the dead shot he says he is, he could probably teach a lot of our troops a thing or two. Our troops? Since when did I adopt the entirety of the freedom fighters? Since you got their captain to fall in love with you. My mistake, plainly. Anything I can do to remedy the situation? His eyes sparkled with a glee few ever saw as he leaned across the table, slipping a hand behind her head as he firmly pressed his lips to hers. Are you so sure you want to? On second thought, she murmured, smiling. I thought so, he said, at his smuggest. They finished their ale slowly, managing idle chit-chat, not wanting to raise any suspicions by talking quietly. After about an hour, the duo rose, paid for their drinks, and headed out to explore the rest of the town. Jay passed Rye early on, heartened to see her chatting with a few teens her own age for once. He merely shot her a subtle thumbs up and continued on his way. Hey, you! He glanced up to see a woman standing in her doorway, hands on her hips, jutting out in an expression he remembered well from his own mother. Yes, ma'am? You're the new one in town everyone's talking about. Oh, are people talking about me? He said. I do wonder what they might say, he said, smiling and making sure to keep an absent element to it. They're saying you're lost in space, she said dryly, and not paying attention to even the most routine things. It's all a matter of perspective, he said solemnly. Sometimes it creates the most wonderful new experiences. She rolled her eyes, but Jay thought he detected a hint of amusement. I was wondering if you'd be so kind as to help me with a few chores if you like new experiences. My son was supposed to be here this week, but hasn't shown up, and I'm getting impatient. New experiences are what I live for, he said cheerfully, wondering at the tone in her voice. There was something familiar there. He pushed it aside. I shall happily do my best to help you with these chores. I'm very good at poetry. I could write you an ode. There was no mistaking the amusement this time. No poetry necessary. More like holding things and helping me find the best place to hang things. Come on in. What's your name, son? Jameson. Come on in, Jameson, and I'll show you. All right. He spent a surprisingly enjoyable afternoon helping Miss Cornwall move furniture and hang pictures as she kept up a steady stream of town gossip, not seeming to expect much out of him. 2 pieces of information got Jay's attention. First, that a group of kids, just a few years younger than him, had been creating trouble around town recently, and second, that there had been increased troop movement in the area. He tuned much of it out after that, mind racing. Maybe Bo was right and this was a trap. Either way, his urge to get out of town felt like an itch he couldn't scratch, growing larger and larger. Mrs. Cornwall offered him dinner, and he wasn't about to turn down a home-cooked meal by this wonderful woman, even if he made a show of protesting that he had to be back at the inn. She finally flagged down a local child and sent him off to the Swan with a note to let his friends know he'd be back late. They had a nice meal, chatting amiably about nothing, Jay making up rambling stories about his family and their adventures in Holly that made little to no sense. Finally, she bid him good night and sent him back. Later, Jez realized she didn't fully believe any of his spaciness, but at the time, he was quite proud of himself. He ambled down the main street of Westcorner, enjoying the quiet of the night as well as admiring the small town by the light of the street's flickering lanterns. Well, hello there, traveler. I was wondering if I might try and make your stay here more enjoyable. Jay slowed at the voice coming from a nearby alley. He was well aware that from Mrs. Cornwell's gossip that they were the only travelers in town. He also didn't like the tone. It made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. That's really okay, thanks. I'm having a great time without your help. That voice he knew. Rye's tone was tight and barely controlled anger. The rest of y'all scat, the male voice commanded. A group of 5 teens about Rye's age scampered out and disappeared into the darkness. Jay stole up to the entrance of the alley, clocking the gang of late teens lurking a little ways down the street. He paused, knowing Rye wouldn't want help if she could handle it. So, I'm in charge around here, so you know. Might be helpful to you and your pals if you went along. Along with what? There was a slight scuffle of feet. Get away from me. You don't mean that. I absolutely do. Get away, Rye bit out. Jay heard a dull thump and an involuntary whimper from his friend, meaning it was past time to step in. He whipped around the corner of the building and charged the burly late teen who had Rye's arms tightly, trying to kiss her. Silently, Jay barreled into the teen, separating from Rye and slamming him into the fence at the far end of the alley with enough strength to knock the breath from the boy's chest. He heard Rye gasp as he glared at the barely shorter teen. That is my friend. We do not hurt my friend. Is that understood? He growled, putting them nose to nose. The kid stared up at him, stunned to speechlessness, or perhaps he hadn't gotten enough breath back to react. Is that understood? Jameson, Rye said quietly. Jay pulled back an inch, but only an inch. Yeah? He's just a big bully. Come on, let's get back to the Swan and the others. Fine. He shoved his face back in. You come near her or any of my other friends again, and you will regret it for a very long time. Understand? When the boy still didn't respond, he shook him. Understand? Now the teen nodded. Yes, sir. He allowed Rye to pull him away, finally removing his arm from the kid's throat, having been barely aware he'd even done that. I'm so sorry for Jameson, Rye said sweetly, with a tight smile that showed the tone was all an act. He gets overexcited when he sees family in danger. I don't think you are who you Rye backed away, drawing Jay with her. I will sick him on you again. Don't think I won't. Leave us alone, and we will forget this little encounter ever happened. Oh, no, we won't. Fine. Jameson, sick him. Jay stepped forward with a growl. Cover or not, daydreamer or not, Rye's safety and friendship was more important. No, you don't understand. He pointed over their shoulders. You're outnumbered. Rye whirled. God's breath, she muttered as she spotted 6 other shapes materializing out of the shadows at the far end of the alley. Jay? I thought maybe they were with him when I first came upon you, he murmured. Do your best. Before Rye could ask what he meant, Jay twirled and sprinted back towards the newcomers as he let out a bellow at the top of his lungs. The teens all took a step back, as Jay had intended. Rye sucked in her breath as her friend careened into the first teen and the rest converged on him. She moved to react, but the leader grabbed her arm and twisted it savagely behind her. She grunted, refusing to give him the satisfaction of more, and lashed out with her foot, snapping his knee. He loosened his grip, yelping in pain, giving her an opportunity she needed to rip her hand free and spin to face him. You bastard, she snarled. He smirked. You're too cute to let slip by. You touch me and you'll end up regretting it. Young and yet so rough. I like that in a girl. Let's get this over with then, big shot, she said. And then a moment later, she found herself face down in the dirt, her right leg throbbing from one of his cronies had gotten her knee, knocking her flat. Let's, he agreed with a chuckle as the crony grabbed her arms and hauled her upright. She let him, keeping herself limp like her leg was too hurt to hold her weight. Leader stepped up until they were only a few inches apart. Rye grinned and slammed her knee into his groin as hard as she could. He let out an undignified squeak and doubled over, clutching himself. She then shifted, taking all her weight back, and shoved off the ground, rocketing her head backwards. The back of her head connected squarely with the other boy's nose. She heard a crack and instantly felt the dampness from the blood on her hair. He swore loudly, and she tore herself free as he grabbed at his nose. Without pause, she turned and sprinted towards the thrashing pile of limbs around Jay. At full speed, she barreled into one of the teenagers, sending him stumbling into another, leaving Jay with only 3 to contend with. He didn't waste the opportunity, careening into the remaining 3 as they all went down in a tumble of limbs. Sorin leaned back in his chair and crumpled the piece of paper in his hand. Eyeing the basket for garbage, he flicked his wrist, sending the paper soaring through the air to land with a quiet plop. Before it had even landed, he was crumpling the next, face set in a deep frown. He tried to corral his thoughts, get them to sink into place neatly, but they refused. Hell of a time to remember how much family matters, he muttered, and dropped his head into his hands. In some ways, he felt better than he had in years, and he liked being able to let that show to those who mattered most at the moment, Annie, Ren, and Vlad. In other ways, though, he knew it was dangerous. His ability to focus and concentrate was shot, as well as all sorts of wayward thoughts of past, present, and future, however limited that may be, crowded into his mind. He needed something to focus on, or he might do something rash. Not that that wasn't a distinct possibility anyway. A distraction came right on time, though, as a knock sounded on his open door. He lifted his head. What is it, Lieutenant? I'm busy. Jackson eyed the overflowing basket, but wisely kept his comments to himself. General Opeland sent me, sir, he said with a salute. Message from Colonel Reese in Greensward, he said, offering Sorin a paper. Details are all here. Give me the gist of it, Sorin said, sitting back and resisting the urge to automatically crumple and throw this sheet as well, since he was running low. Jackson stepped into the room. As you know, the Colonel captured a pair attempting to blow up Greensward Palace about a week and a half ago. Indeed, why the message now? Colonel Reese has been working on them and has been surprisingly unsuccessful. His words, not mine. Really? That was interesting. Reese was frighteningly good at his job. It's why he commanded Greensward, which was Tira's second largest city, and honestly a problem in and of itself. Go on. Regardless, he's garnered enough information to believe that they are not the small-timers we usually get, but actually part of the freedom fighters. And what's he basing this on? Intuition, mostly. The relevant part is that the woman claims to be Jasmine Lockholm, and Colonel Reese believes her. Jasmine Lockholm, Sorin repeated, sitting up. His eyes narrowed as he recalled the name. She's the girl Vladimir ordered killed after she saved Eladan. And then he also remembered. Vladimir sent you up to the area to ensure it was done. He frowned. How is she still alive? You were there. Jackson thankfully didn't take that as a condemnation. Sorin had fought against sending Jackson, who had still been a boy. Apparently through a lot of luck. I was sure we'd gotten everyone but Virginia Eladan at the time, he said. Colonel Reese didn't give many details, but General Opeland is understandably intrigued, especially by the notion they're freedom fighters. They would be our first successful capture. I'm well aware of that, he said. General Opeland is planning to leave in about an hour to visit the prisoners himself to see if he can't scare information out of the pair. He's asked me to accompany him to see if I can positively identify them from the group up by Westcorner or confirm Jasmine's identity. If she'd been at Westcorner, you would have known. Jackson shrugged. It was dark and raining. I'm assuming she picked up some souvenirs from surviving a bombing, and I thought she was dead. With those misconceptions, it's very possible I might not have. Sorin nodded, conceding the point. I'm then to stay on permanent loan to help out around Greensward so Colonel Reese can devote more attention to the prisoners. There's been some civil unrest around the city since the explosion, and they need more hands. It's a shame we'll lose you, but you'll do well there, no doubt, Sorin said mildly. Jackson grinned. Going to miss me as a handy distraction for Annie. I feel as if I should give you hell for using her nickname, but considering she wouldn't have it any other way, I have no leg to stand on. Greensward is only a day's ride. I'm sure I'll be in and out if you need my services. Sorin snorted. I'll keep that in mind, Lieutenant. Good luck. The younger man managed a wry smile. They both knew his track record wasn't great, but he was somewhere between a nephew and a little brother, considering he'd been Vladimir's ward from the age of 14, so that would do it. I'll do my best, sir. Tell Vladimir something for me, would you? As long as I won't get my head bitten off, of course, sir. Tell him not to waste too much time before making up with our sister. Jackson raised his eyebrows, clearly able to tell Sorin had more to say. And, sir? Take care of yourself, he said, then quickly hurried on. Annie would be most displeased if you got yourself hurt. With pleasure, sir, Jackson said. I should get going. General Opelin is itching to leave. Of course, you're dismissed. The young lieutenant saluted and vanished out the door. Sorin again leaned back in his chair, absently crumpling the message from Reese, before remembering and flattening it back out to skim it. Jackson had covered the important parts. Sorin traced his finger across Jasmine's name. Her survival startled him. They'd been so certain they'd been thorough. Leave no loose ends, had been Vladimir's order. To have missed their main target entirely. Well, perhaps not entirely, he thought, as he scanned the bit about her scars. They'd almost gotten her, but not quite wasn't good enough. He racked his brain for what he knew about Lockholm. Small estate with a decent acreage holding, perhaps a little larger than average. They raised good, solid horses. Those were the only facts Sorin knew about the place or its inhabitants. He couldn't even recall Jasmine's father's name offhand, which was shoddy of him, even after 2 years. Bert! He yelled. The cantankerous old man shuffled into the room. Yes, sir? Find me all the information we have on Earl Lockholm. He's in Hillen's dukedom, which used to be Elladan's. I'll get on that as soon as I can. Sorin favored him with his breast predatory smile. How about now, Bert? The old man's face twisted. His devotion to Vlad and dislike of Sorin, and everyone else, was on the extreme side sometimes. Very well, sir. He turned and disappeared, Sorin glaring at his back as he went. As soon as the lackey had vanished, Sorin crumpled Reese's message and tossed it neatly in the basket. He hoped, despite his own lack of knowledge, that their file on the Lockholm family would be sufficient. Something about her survival made him jumpy, made the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. At least, Jackson had provided an excellent distraction. As good a place to stop as any, Jay said. It's dark out, and it's time for our beauty sleep. No, it's not, Dave protested. You left us in the middle of a fight. My friend grinned. Exactly. The boy made a sour face, but looked between us. You know what I think? What's that? I asked. We need to escape and make sure the freedom fighters win. That's the spirit, Ladster, and we agree entirely. Now, though, it's time to sleep. We'll need a little assistance on the escape front, so we just need to be prepared. Dave eyed him, obviously unable to tell if he was joking or not. Do you really think? Only time will tell, I said gently, not wanting to raise his hopes too much, although I knew Bo and the others would do all they could to spring us. I've spent so much time talking. Shall need to rest my voice tomorrow. Oi, Jezzy! Don't call me that, I said automatically as I gently tested my shoulders, finding them still sore. Not that I was surprised. It had only been a day. Do you think the poor invalid will be able to talk tomorrow? Jay? Yes? Sod off. No problem, Jezzy. See you in the morning. James? Yes, he asked, sweetness positively oozing from his lips. You were really asking for it. Am I? Stella gave us both the stink eye. Please shut up. I saluted. Jay pretended to snore loudly before cutting off abruptly when Dave kicked him in the shin. Ow! Stella, call your demon brother off. David? Yeah? If he speaks again, kick him harder. Dave giggled. Can I kick him anyway? No, you may not. He sighed loudly. Fine. Jay grumbled something unintelligible before silence finally descended over the cell. If anyone else said anything, I missed it, having drifted off. Both Jay and I were up early the next morning. We sat shoulder to shoulder. Jay's attention was on our sleeping companions, while mine alternated between the corridor and the window, which was just starting to show the light. I've been thinking. Dangerous prospect, I said glibly. Shush you. I was thinking it might work best if we split the story. Wouldn't it be cool if we could just do it seamlessly, like we were one person telling it? We have an audience who doesn't really seem to care, I pointed out, testing my right shoulder. I care, he said, sticking out his lower lip at me. Fine, we can do it seamlessly, although I think you're doing a very good job. Especially when your giant breasts when you want to start talking are a good indicator that it's your turn. This does mean no more complaining about talking, mister. But I complain so well. That I can't deny. I winced and dropped my arm after it began to protest the motion. Why, thank you, my lady. Don't call me that. Would you prefer Jesse? James, he chortled. I had no other word for it, especially after the demonstration a few days prior. Good. So we have ourselves a deal? Deal. Next time you pause, I'll butt right in and pick it up. I mentally shook my head. We'd already basically been doing that, but if you really wanted to go for it, far be it from me to argue. Jay nodded, leaning his head against the rough wall. I glanced at the window again. One of these days, I'm going to sit on your shoulders and see what's out that window. On me? He said, sounding half asleep. I didn't blame him. It was hard to fully wake up some mornings when all we had to look forward to was more of the same. Same food, same views, same people, with the only deviation being whether or not Reese was going to beat the snot out of us. Yeah, then I can describe to you what I see. You weigh a ton, he said, teasing by default. And what if I want to see? You'll have to live. I could sit on your shoulders. If I weigh a ton, I don't even want to think about what you weigh. Anyway, my shoulders hurt enough without adding you. But what's one or two more broken bones? Gee, thanks, he snickered. I fight dirty sometimes. I nudged him in the side with my cast. Behave yourself. I know all about you, including, say, the time Marguerite convinced you that she should dye your hair. Jay blushed right to the roots of said hair, sitting up to look back at me. Where in the... Bry. I grinned. Right in one. Don't you love blackmail? He slumped. I don't want to know why that story came up. Bry thought it was hilarious. He made a face. Of course he did. Behave, I told him again, resting my head on his shoulders. I felt him chuckle. I am. Good. Has anyone ever told you you have comfy shoulders? Can't say as they have, but thanks. We lapsed into comfortable silence. It was hard to believe sometimes that I'd only met Jay 6 months before. It felt like ages. For a moment, I toyed with the idea that he felt so familiar because of Bry, but I dismissed that as uncharitable. As similar as the brothers could be, they were still their own unique people. It was nice having him with me, even if I didn't wish him the pain that Reese inflicted. Having his ever-cheerful optimism, though, made everything that much easier to bear. I knew he'd always have a ready quip, no matter how dire the situation. I'm glad you're here, I murmured around a yawn of my own, eyes shut. Where else would I be? You know what I mean. I do, but I'm trying to keep from being insulted. You know what I mean, I repeated, nudging him again, a bit harder. Yeah, you want me to die. James, I said, sitting upright to glare at him. He grinned. You honestly prefer me over even Bo? Okay, maybe not over Bo. I settled back next to him. I think you're lying. I most certainly am not. Nothing personal, but my boyfriend comes first in my affections. R2, am not. Stella rolled over to pin us both with a sleepy glare. Would you two shut up already? You're like toddlers squabbling over the last piece of candy. It'd be me, Jay said, even as I opened my mouth to say the same thing. I stuck my tongue out at him as Stella groaned. God's breath, I can feel maturity level dropping as we speak. Nothing wrong with a little immaturity on occasion, Jay said righteously. Stella sat up and stretched before shaking her brother's shoulder. Up and at him, kid, she said. Dave's response was to make a sleepy noise of protest and curl up tighter. Wake up, David. It's almost breakfast and then story time. He yawned, but sat up. I'm up. Morning. Morning, Dave, Jay said, and then poked me. I retorted in kind, and by the time my arms were protesting too much to continue, Dave was wide awake and giggling, and we heard footsteps signaling the arrival of breakfast. We inhaled the meal, despite our best attempts to take it slow. And then Dave aimed hopeful eyes at us, asking us to continue. Jay and I exchanged a quick glance before I picked it back up. Bo, Jez, and Jessie sat at one of the wooden tables, talking quietly and casting increasingly anxious glances at the door. The bartender came to clear away their plates. "You folks need anything else tonight?" he asked, obviously ready to call it a night. They were the only ones left in the place. "No, we're fine, thanks," Jessie said, drawing her attention away from the doorway long enough to smile at him. "Your friends are fine. We don't get much trouble hereabouts," he said, before nodding to them and vanishing into the kitchen. "It's getting awfully late for them to still be gone," Jez said. "At least for Jay. They don't say to be right back after dinner. What do you think could have happened?" "Westcorner does seem like a really sleepy town," Jessie said, but her expression remained troubled. "What if they've run into a problem?" Both turned to Bo. He nodded without hesitation. "Come on, let's go find our wayward friends," he said, standing and making sure his sword was secure on his belt before heading for the door. Jay, meanwhile, used the opportunity Rye had given him to plant his fist into the face of one of the bullies as another hit him from behind. He rolled, coming to his feet, ready for the third. Jay sidestepped, thrusting his foot out, and as the young man tripped, grabbed his shirt and helped him fly even further, using his forward momentum. As the man plowed into the dirt, his four companions backed off to begin a more coordinated attack. Jay realized that Rye was nowhere to be found. Even as that thought filtered in, he heard her swearing loudly from further down the alley. He couldn't hear her clearly, but didn't need to. Before the five could fully recuperate, he charged towards the gap between the two. Jay slammed his shoulder into one, shoving him aside enough that he could spot Rye down at the far end. She was held fast as the leader approached her. Jay sprinted in that direction, but only made it halfway before he was tackled. Squirming, he sought to get back on his feet to reach his friend. Rye was hauled out of the fray shortly after planting her knee in one of the young man's stomach. Her assailant, with the bleeding and probably broken nose, grabbed her arms from behind and manhandled her back towards the leader, his size working against the smaller, slenderer girl. She struggled to break free, swearing loudly at her inability to do so. The leader glared as he stalked up to her, still a little bent over, no doubt from pain in his groin. With a quick dart forward, he stepped so they were nose to nose, not giving her any room to maneuver or repeat her earlier action. "Get away from me, you bastard," she said, trying to shake her arm free. The goon only twisted it tighter, causing her to gasp as pain shot through the limb. "Got you," the leader said in smug satisfaction, pinching her cheek hard. Rye tried to kick him. He merely laughed and grabbed her chin. "Save yourself some serious trouble and let us go," she told him coldly, trying to wrench out of his grasp. "Or you could save your friend some serious bruises. Call him off. Do me this one little favor, and we'll call it even." She shook her head vehemently. "No way in hell," she said. "I think you underestimate Jameson's skill." 5 against 1 is bound to fall in favor of the 5. "You're outnumbered, sweetheart," he said with a wide smile, pressing closer, ignoring her squirms as she tried to stomp his feet. "How about when the odds are even?" The gang all froze. Jay, relief flooding through him, didn't bother, using the distraction to pop one in the stomach. "Back away from my friends, and I might be convinced to let you all survive," Bo continued, voice icy. The leader darted out of Rye's reach to assess the trio of newcomers. The captain folded his arms across his chest, staring the younger man down. "Now, my friend, or else things will get ugly. There are still 2 more of us than you. Plus," he scoffed, "you've got 2 more girls." Bo smirked, made a small gesture, and in tandem the 3 of them dropped their hands to their waists and drew their knives, although they made it obvious in the motion that they held swords as well. "You were saying?" he asked mildly. Rye used the distraction to jam her heel into the instep of her captor. He grunted, loosening his grip. It took all of a breath for her to bring her arms around front and grab his shoulders, throwing her weight forward. Caught off guard and still off balance, he came up over her back and slammed hard into the ground between her and the leader. Still trying to settle her internal panic at what could have happened, she favored the leader with an insolent grin as she casually wiped her hands on her tunic. "What was that about, girls?" she asked. He paled, visible even in the dim light, and stepped back. "Did I say anything about that?" he squeaked. "What I meant was—" "Give it up," Jay told him, pinching his nose to try to stop the bleeding, as he stepped back to join the others, not wanting to give the goons any free shots. "You lost, and you know it." Bo regarded the group. "What do we do with them now?" "Stuff him and put him on my mantle," Rye muttered, jogging over to join them. Jez snickered. "Why would you want his ugly mug up there?" "Not that you have a mantle," Jessie added. "True. We could turn them into the local authorities. The ones who've been letting them run amok in the first place. Great idea, Jay." "No need to be sarcastic," he whined. "I just spent time getting my head mashed in." "Oh, good point. I'm very sorry," Jez said, smirking. The gang stared at them in undisguised confusion and surprise. "Can we at least try and act mature, folks?" Bo asked, but amusement in his voice gave him away. "He's not dim," one of the gang sputtered. The friends exchanged Glances. Never said I was. Just that I'm easily distracted, which isn't wrong, Jay said, honestly dumbfounded. I think we all know who the stupid one is. We'll tell, the leader said quickly, trying to get some sort of footing back. And who's going to believe the local bully squad? Plenty of people. If you're lying about this, you're probably lying about other things. Well done, Rye said sarcastically, rubbing her wrists where the one had gripped her. What are we going to do with them? She asked Bo. We're going to escort these fine gentlemen to the town mayor and explain to him that they were making advances on you and beating on Jameson. Then we make sure it's understood that if they so much as look at any of us again, we won't go nearly as easy on them. Is that understood? Yes, the leader said sullenly, his cronies nodding and echoing their agreement. The mayor was properly outraged by the gang's daring and assured the friends that they would be properly dealt with and not give them a moment's more trouble. Within the hour, the five were back at the Swan. Jay and Rye had just given a quick description of what had led up to the fight. Bo lit a couple lamps in the common room so they could talk, and Jessie could patch Jay up. Ow! Jay whined, fidgeting as Jessie bandaged his head. She rolled her eyes. The fidgeting will only make it worse, genius. But it hurts! Of course it does. You recently got it slammed into at least one fist, and I'm guessing maybe a rock. Riley winced, holding a block of ice to the back of her head where she'd cracked into the one man's nose. I did fall a couple times. Fall? Bo repeated. Using it as a relative term, of course, he said, taking the ice Jessie offered, and gingerly putting it against the bandage on his face, peeking with one eye around it. I suppose I should figure out a way to thank Miss Cornwall tomorrow. Who? Mrs. Dolores Cornwall. He yawned, then winced. I think maybe I cracked a rib, he said sheepishly. Jessie rolled her eyes again. All right, I know you're going to love this, but the shirt has to come off. It was a testament to how much Jay hurt that he only grinned a little and made no comment as he set the ice down and carefully worked his shirt off. So who exactly is Mrs. Cornwall? Bo asked. She's an older lady who lives just on the edge of town proper. I helped her do a bunch of chores around her house today that she can't manage by herself anymore. In exchange, she talked at me all day. Learn anything interesting? Ow! Damn it, Jessie, he yelped. Did you not see the bruise? She prodded it again. You mean this one? He gritted his teeth. Yes, that one, he said tightly. Of course I did. I was just trying to see if it's bruised or cracked. It's a little hard to tell just from sight. Now answer Bo. It'll help you ignore the pain. He glared at her, but turned to the captain anyway. She warned me about our friendly bullies. Useful, Rye muttered, which was the first thing she'd said since they'd returned. She shifted the ice to more adequately cover the bruise on her head. And she told me there had been an increase in troop movements in the area in the past week. He sat forward, ignoring the protests of his chest. I really think we should scrap this and head home. I can't shake my bad feeling about all this. Bo looked between them, taking in their serious and concerned faces. We'll do whatever you think is best, Jess said softly. I'd like to get what information we can, but our safety and lives are more important. Too late to totally save those, Rye said dryly. We need some time to recuperate, though, and I'd like to give our informant one more chance. We'll leave tomorrow night, after full dark. I'm fine to leave tonight, Jay said, beginning to stand, then carefully sinking back onto the bench with a groan. Or not. For now, let's catch some sleep, Bo said. Jessie, got him all patched up? She finished wrapping a bandage around his chest to keep everything in line. Just finished. Jay, I'm honestly not sure what's the matter with your ribs, but as long as you take it easy, they should be fine soon enough. Come on, Jay. I'll help you upstairs, Bo said, offering an arm. Jez watched them go before standing as well. Let's go. No point on dwelling on things, she said, herding her friends ahead of her. Despite the late night, none of them slept in the next morning. Rye was the last one down, only seconds behind Jay, who happily snagged a spot next to Jessie, grinning at their younger friend. How are the ribs feeling this morning? Jessie asked. Sore, but not too bad, he said, considering he'd slept soundly enough, though Bo woke him up every few hours in case he had a concussion. What's today's plan? Rye asked. Jez and I'll return to the Hog's Heel and wander town just like yesterday. Jay can do whatever he likes as long as he doesn't want protection, and I figure you and Jessie can wander town together as long as neither of you have a problem with that. Of course not, she said. In the meantime, Jessie, let's go chat with the bartender. See if he knows anything about Mrs. Cornwall's troop movements. At her nod, Bo and Jessie slid out of the table and headed for the bar. Jay mumbled something as they left. What was that? We can't understand you around your mouth full of food, Jez said. He swallowed quickly, aiming a look at her. I said, I do not need protection. I can take care of myself, thank you very much. And that's why you decided it was such a good idea to go after... Jez trailed off a little too late, realizing abruptly she was crossing a line. Rye blanched, rocketing from the table, mumbling an excuse about the bathroom, and took off through the front door. Jay's expression darkened. Here's the deal. I don't give a rat's ass that it's obvious you're protecting your own past. I'm sure you have your reasons, and they're good ones. But you pressured Ryan into telling us about her past. I didn't pressure her, Jez protested. You asked. That's enough for her. Don't you get that? We're the only family she's got now, he snapped. If you didn't already know that about her, then maybe you're not even half the person I thought you might be. God's breath. Ryan's still just a kid, not even 17. She's lost everyone she's cared about already once. You understand how hard that is on someone? How it never leaves them as long as they live? It doesn't matter if they make new friends, new loved ones. The fact that the others aren't there to see you eats it at you for the rest of your life. Half of what Riley says is merely for protection. She's used to having to watch every word for fear someone will use it against her. I have no doubt she's better than she used to be, that you and the others have helped with that. But it's raw again. Didn't you notice that when she did speak last night, everything dripped with sarcasm? Jez opened her mouth again, but he went right on. You'll let me finish, Jezzy, because you need to hear this. You're a good person. I'm not saying that you're not, and I think most of the time you're fine. But you need to be as sensitive towards others as we are about your past. I think I can safely include even Bo and Jessie in the fact that all of us have left some sort of issue behind. He stood now radiating anger. You're her friend, Jez, he said flatly, and then turned and left. She stared after him, stomach plummeting somewhere around the regions of her toes. She'd known, even as the words had started to come out, that she shouldn't say them, and she'd stop, but the truth was, Jay was right, and it hurt more because she should have understood. She'd lost Bri. They all had, but she and Bri had been so close. Still, she clung tightly to the fact that there had been no official news of Colin's death one way or another, and the rest of her family was safely ensconced in Lockholm, keeping their heads down and staying out of the crossfire. So she could at least get an inkling through the forced separation how much Bri had meant to her, even for just the short time. And her family all thought they'd lost her. She dropped her head in her hands, knowing she owed not just Rye, but Jay an apology. He'd done nothing but help, and she'd given him grief for being beat up. Where'd they go? Jessie asked as they came back over. I'm an idiot, she said, by way of answer, standing. You might want to catch up with Rye. Her friend eyed her, but nodded. I'll see you two later, she said, and headed out after the others. What did you do? I'll explain on the way to the Hog's Heel, she said, and led the way out, quietly outlining her comment and the two responses on the way. Jay, meanwhile, had headed the opposite direction towards the outskirts of town, knowing he had to regain his equilibrium before he could even think about putting on his jolly, good-natured, completely unfazed by anything face. He leaned against one of the trees, taking deep breaths to settle himself. He sympathized with their teenage companion, considering he'd lost his entire family too, but at least his parents hadn't ditched him, allowing him a pretty normal and conventional childhood. He closed his eyes, letting the quiet warble of birds and rustle of leaves soothe him. He'd always felt at home in the forest, and now the familiar sounds allowed him to let out some of the recent stress, from Jessie learning his identity to Jez hitting too close to home. When the first pitter-patter of rain drew his attention, he stayed where he was, listening to it hit the canopy above and begin to snake its way down leaves and branches towards the undergrowth where he stood. Finally, a drop splashed off a leaf above him and landed on the tip of his nose. He grinned, feeling composed again. Shaking himself like a dog, he sought to fully separate himself from anxieties, or at least compartmentalize them. Later, he couldn't say what had caught his attention, but he froze, listening hard. Sure enough, he recognized the quiet crunch of old foliage and the cracking of a stick. He remained slouched against the tree, eyes half closed, but closely scanned the surrounding area. Determined not to make the bunny mistake again, he peered around. A flash of blue drew his attention, another twig cracked, and a low-spoken oath reached him. Jay didn't bother to stick around to be sure they were even after him. He knew that blue livery. Like a shot, Jay took off towards town, only slowing fractionally when he reached the main street. He burst into the Hog's Heel and slid into place next to Bo scant moments later. Jay? Bo asked softly. The sooner we leave, the better. What happened? I went out to the woods to calm down, so I wouldn't blow my cover again. Someone was stalking me, or at least stalking through the woods. It could be bandits, or even our friends from last night, not to mention the distinct possibility of rabbits. Bo's words sounded cavalier, but even Jay could see the concern on his face. He sucked in a breath, a little winded from his sprint. Rabbits don't swear, last time I checked, and trust me, I'd know the uniform of the three anywhere. Bo glanced worriedly at the bar and shifted. We still have a better chance of getting out under cover of night, especially if the weather continues to deteriorate. I think we have no chance but to wait. What if they come for us? Jay and Jez asked almost simultaneously. Jay glanced at the young woman for the first time before returning his attention to Bo. I don't think they will. It would involve more trouble than it's worth for potential freedom fighters. Westcorner might not be large, but it's an important crossroads town, and even the three need to keep up good relations here, so they have unfettered access to the main road along the alien border. No, they'll wait for us to bolt. And we can't wait them out? I suppose we could try, but we have no idea as to the strength and stretch of their resources. They may be able to keep up patrols in camp indefinitely. And there's the potential they'll convince the mayor that letting them in to find us is in his best interest if the town doesn't get tired of their presence first and hand us over. We'll bolt, but we'll make it as difficult on them as possible. Bo looked between his two friends. I'm well aware there are some issues right now. Please work them out before you both get us killed, or worse. Understand? Yes, sir, Jay said, keeping his voice low. He shot another glance at Jez before standing and sliding out of the inn, back in full acting mode. Jez grinned. How in the world do I apologize? I think you have your answer right there. She frowned down to her ale. It can't be as simple as a basic apology. Why not? First, it's a good place to start, and second, they're your friends. Rye, at least, knows you very well. She doesn't know who I am. Don't give me that bullshit, Bo said with feeling. Jez and Jasmine are exactly the same person and always have been. She doesn't know your birthday name. Big difference. Jez couldn't particularly disagree with his argument. Although she was unable to admit where and how she'd grown up, the only real thing that had changed from her death was that Jez had learned a lot more and had so many more life experiences and skills than Jasmine had ever dreamed about at 18. But Jasmine now had just as many skills and freedoms. Apologies first, then we'll see what other groveling I need to do. He rather obviously squashed a smile. Sounds like a good idea to me. She braced herself as she stood. Okay, I'm going to go find Rye and then Jay. He'll be harder to apologize to. Harder to apologize to, but probably not harder to convince to forgive. She winced. Don't remind me. I'm really going to have to grovel for a while. Probably, he said easily. I'll wait here till you're done. It took her only a few minutes to be directed towards Rye and Jessie by the locals, finding them wandering down the main street, talking quietly. When Jessie spotted her, she nudged Rye, then veered off to look at the window offerings of a dress shop. Rye continued a few steps until the duo were face to face. I'm sorry, Jess said, scuffing one foot nervously, but forcing herself to hold Rye's inscrutable gaze. And not just for the comment this morning. I should have let you tell us your past, if and only if you were ready, not because I was curious. It was hypocritical of me to even ask, all things considered. Riley smiled faintly. Apology accepted, and I don't really see it as the same thing. My past is not good, but it's not important in the grand scheme of things. Yours is. She opened her mouth and then closed it. She'd always suspected Bri knew. Did Rye and Jessie as well? It's not that I don't want you to know, it just can't get out. I understand. Honest, Rye said. Whatever your name was before, if it got out, it would bring trouble to others. I've got family in a perilous position, she said softly before shaking her head. But this isn't about me. It's about you and the fact I was a jerk. Rye laughed. Which makes it about you, too. But I'm serious. Apology accepted. I'm glad you know. Jay, too, even. I can't always control my emotions about it, especially when it comes to Bean. Think your parents are still out there? Don't know, don't care, the teenager said firmly. They're not my family anymore. Jess hugged her, understanding her sentiments completely. I'm glad to be part of your family, Rye, and I'm very glad nothing more serious than a few bruises happened to you or Jay last night. Her friend shuddered slightly. I'll agree with you there. She pulled back and smiled cheekily. Just try and think before you speak, okay? I don't think Jay's ego can handle too much more battering right now. Although, I heard he was still quite capable of giving you a lecture and a half. Yeah, let's not talk about that. You haven't seen him, have you? He was heading back to Mrs. Cornwall's house, that direction. He said it was because he wanted to feel useful, but I'm guessing he just wants more home-cooked free food. Home-cooked free food sounds excellent. I won't argue with that. Thanks, Rye. What else are friends for? Jess flashed her a grin. Within a couple minutes, she knocked on Mrs. Cornwall's door. Jay's cheerful voice, which floated out of the open windows, cut off abruptly. Who is it? An unfamiliar voice that had to be Mrs. Cornwall called. It's Jackie, Jameson's sister. May I speak to him? He's mad at me right now, and I need to apologize. Jay paused, slowly lowering the picture he'd been holding up for Mrs. Cornwall's inspection. The older woman looked at him. Jameson? He nodded pensively, although he was heartened by how little time had passed before she was coming to apologize. To him, that meant her earlier comment and insensitivity had just been a brief blank, not a chronic problem. Which made sense, considering Bri had been attracted to her. That's my sister. Is it okay if she comes in? Oh, why, yes, of course. Mrs. Cornwall opened the door and smiled. Hello, dearie. Hi, Mrs. Cornwall, Jess said, offering her hand. Jameson told me you've been very nice to him. I'd like to thank you for that. Jay watched her closely since Mrs. Cornwall's back was to him. Her gaze flicked to him and then back to the older woman. It's been my pleasure. Your brother has provided admirable company for an old lady like myself. Jess smiled. You don't look that old to me, ma'am. Mind if I borrow Jameson for a moment? Not at all, as long as it's okay with him. Sure, he said, and wandered out after her. Jess shut the door gently and moved a couple yards away, keeping her voice low. I'm sorry, Jay. You were completely right, and it was incredibly insensitive to me, especially this morning's comment on top of everything else. I guess I just didn't think, she said with a rueful smile. If there's one thing I understand well, it's not thinking before you speak, Jess said. Let us not forget my introduction to Mick. I forgive you. Just try and behave yourself, okay, Jessie? Her cringe was quite satisfying. Jessie, seriously? Anything would be better than that. Your name doesn't give me a lot to work with, so don't blame me for a horrible nickname. Why do I even need a nickname? He grinned. Let's call it an incentive not to speak before you think. That's grossly unfair. Life, he said. Now, I really should get back to helping good Mrs. Cornwall rearrange her paintings. An honorable duty, I'm sure. Be careful of your ribs. Trust me, I'm doing as little as possible that would stress them. Surprisingly to Jez reached out and pulled him into a gentle hug, mindful of his injuries. I'll see you this evening. What was that for? He asked, aware he wasn't following his own advice to think first and speak after. She patted his shoulder. We're supposed to be twins, aren't we? Plus, I owe you one. A small one, she added hastily. I needed a little kick in the butt this morning. With a wave, she headed back into town, presumably to the Hog's Heel and Bow, while Jay returned to the house, mind now racing forward to the planned escape that evening. Ren and Annie's ongoing mock war was cut off by a brief knock at the door before Jackson McRose poked his head into the room. Sir, he said with a nod at Ren. He's one of the few people who consistently referred to Ren as Sir anymore, Annie thought, and had to smile. The young lieutenant, who now turned his attention to her, was like the little sibling she'd never had. I heard you're looking for me, he said. I'm afraid I'm already heading out to Greensward first thing tomorrow on permanent loan. Ah, she said, hopping up. If you don't want to go, I can prevail on... She frowned, abruptly remembering she wasn't speaking to her oldest brother. I can prevail on Sorin to keep you here. That's no need for that, he said. I've already talked to the commander. I can be useful in Greensward, and I'm sure I'll be back frequently. Although Jackson was still just a baby, not even 20 yet, he had a good sense of humor, and they'd been friends from almost day one. When she'd first met him, she'd thought he was just a very good actor, but it didn't take long until he realized he genuinely liked her for her. That's why she trusted him with this. He'd understand. You'd better be, Jaxie, she said. Come on, I won't keep you from packing. We can talk in your room. He rolled his eyes at the nickname, bestowed by a young freedom fighter girl up north near Westcorner. Okay, he said, and nodded again at Ren. I promise I won't steal her for long, sir. It's not a problem. Take as long as you need, Ren said as the young man stepped back into the hall. Ren, Annie murmured as she stood. His eyes darted to her as she subtly pulled his letter out of her pocket and flashed it at him. He nodded understanding. She bounded out into the hallway and grinned at the lieutenant. Come along, Jaxie Jax. Only you would take an already horrendous nickname and make it worse, he grumbled, but smiled anyway. You'll be okay here, right? He asked, glancing at her as they set off towards his room. Of course I will. I've got Rennie. I heard about your fight with the general. Is there anyone in this castle who hasn't? Probably not. And the commander? What about him? Jackson raised an eyebrow and she felt herself smile. Sorin. No, to be honest, we're getting along the best we have in a very long time. He's changing. It's a good change, isn't it? He asked quietly. I've seen it too. She elbowed him in the side, grinning. Anyone ever tell you you're nosy? He laughed. Not since I was a kid. You're still a kid. You know what I mean. I promise I won't speak out of turn, Annie. I'm just curious. You know me. All our fates are tied in with your brothers. The two reached Jackson's rooms in the ensuing silence. How soon does the commander think? He won't even admit he's thinking it. The young lieutenant studied her face and then nodded. What do you want to talk to me about? He asked, opening his door and motioning her in. Not surprisingly, the small room was neat as a pin, Jackson's scant belongings all in their place. The only personal items were on his dresser, just as they'd always been at the house, too. A child's old horse and cart set, and a painting of him and his parents. She pulled out Ren's letter. I need you to find a way to mail this in Greensward. He took it, eyeing the name and the handwriting, before tossing it on his bed and reaching for his bag. Why do you say it that way? It has to get to the freedom fighters. He spun back to her. Excuse me? He managed, eyes wide, bag dropping to the floor. Annie, are you... No, it's not that. It's clean, Jackson, I promise. You know Sorin's theory, right? That they're run by King Patrick's younger son? It's gotten around, yes, he said carefully. She pointed at the letter. Ren thinks his name is most likely Beau and wrote him that. She held his gaze. Beau deserves to know his brother is alive. And that's all it says. Yes, pretty much. Pretty much. I swear to you it's clean. Nothing incriminating, nothing dangerous to us. It's just a letter from a man who has never and might never met his brother. You do realize I haven't got the faintest idea how to contact the freedom fighters, right? She grinned at him. I know you're very resourceful, Jaxie Jax. You'll figure something out. I have faith. This is entirely the wrong sort of thing to have faith in me about, he pointed out. And if I do this, no more Jaxie. Aw, come on, but it's so cute. No more. She sighed loudly. Fine, be that way, Jax. I'll try and curb the impulses. I'm sure that'll work ever so well, he muttered, but returned her hug. You owe me. I know, she said. Take care of yourself in Greensward, and stay out of Reese's way. Colonel Reese and I have an understanding, but I'll do my best to behave, he said. If you ever need to talk, write me. I can be here in a day. And this is why I like you, she said happily, patting him briefly on the head before dancing out of his room. Ride safe, Jaxie! Annie! He yelled after her, but she could hear the laughter in his voice. She made a quick stop in her room to pick up some clothes and a few necessary supplies for the next few days, before returning to Wren's room and bounding through the door. Rennie Muffin, what drawer is empty? He rolled his eyes. Bottom one. How'd the chat with Jackson go? Oh, dandy, except I'm not allowed to call him Jaxie anymore. She could see the smile fighting to escape, but Wren kept it inside. That's really too bad, Annie. I'm sure it's hard to survive and call someone by their full name. She grinned. I haven't called Jax Jackson since the day I met him. Why in the name of the gods would I start now? Even when I don't call you Rennie or Muffin or something else, I still just call you Wren. Same thing. Take that for your attempt at sarcasm. Point for me. You do sometimes. Only when I'm exasperated at you, she said, pulling out her nightclothes. And I get exasperated with you far more often than I do with Jaxie Jax. I'm going to go change in your bathroom. She tossed him a reverent salute and disappeared into his old bedroom. Annie poked her head out again. All things considered, it seems pretty silly that I'm changing in another room. He smirked, his voice lighting with mischief. As much as I wouldn't protest, I'd rather keep you for myself and not whatever lackey your brothers have watching us right now. Her eyebrows shot up and she laughed. Yet another reason why I love you. Hey, I have feelings that way, he said, laughing too. Go change, and then I will. Do you change in here every day? Mostly, yes. Vlad would rather I didn't and has said so, but the price I pay for my modesty is a small one. She frowned. Which is? He shrugged. Every couple of days, one of the guards comes in and searches my drawers and goes through all my clothes in case I've got a weapon stashed in that empty room, or that I can craft one in the couple of minutes I'm in there. It took her a moment and deliberate deep breath to not go ream out her eldest brother yet again. Guess it is pretty small. Okay, changing time. You know, you could come watch. Now that is something I suspect your brothers would both object to rather strongly. I appreciate having my arms in their sockets, thanks. She snickered and stepped back, pulling her shirt off as she heard a knock at the door. Commander Dakamar asked me to give you these, she heard one of the guards say. She peeked out in time to see him pass Wren a set of crutches. She winced, freshly furious at Vlad, before drawing back into the room to finish changing. As soon as she was done, she let out a contented hum, burying her nose briefly in the shirt before skipping out. Wren, who had obviously been attempting the crutches, froze, eyes widening a little as he stared at her. Disconcerted by his actions, she stopped too. Hi? His gaze ran over her, and she glanced down too, wondering if she'd missed a stain on the old baggy pants and too large shirt. When she spotted nothing, she looked back up to realize Wren had closed the gap between them. Wren? She asked when he still didn't say anything. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear before running his fingers down her cheek. He smiled softly, slipping the hand to cup the back of her head before pressing his lips to hers. She melted into it, wrapping her arms around his neck. When they finally pulled back of mutual accord, neither moved, except Wren rested his forehead against hers. You know, she murmured, sneaking another quick peck, if I'd known that all I had to do to get you to kiss me was wear old clothes, I would have done it ages ago. He chuckled. Whose clothes? They don't exactly seem your style. Pants are mine, but the shirt is Sorin's. I steal a lot of his old clothes. We're about the same height, even if he's a little taller and definitely broader. She loosened a hand long enough to pluck at the shoulder of her shirt. And they smell good. Smell good? He echoed. Yeah, of safety. When we were little, and I spent most nights curled up next to him in his bed instead of my own. Even if they stop actually smelling like him, they still feel safe. She smiled at the memories, suddenly ridiculously glad she was getting that brother back again, even if she seemed to be irrevocably losing Vlad at the same time. Wren kissed her again. I should go change, and no, you may not come. I wouldn't be surprised if your brothers would have an even bigger problem with that than the other way around. She laughed and stepped back. Have it your way, then, as long as you acknowledge it would be more fun my way. No argument there. He moved awkwardly to his dresser, snagged some clothes, and then disappeared into the old bedroom. Annie bit her lip against giggles as she heard a small crash and a much louder curse. Are you quite all right, Muffin? Don't call me that, and yes, I'm fine. Stupid crutches. Sorin said they'd take some getting used to. No, really? He asked, obviously put out. She decided her better course of action was to not respond, so she hummed to herself, moving to his window until he reappeared looking harassed. My sprained ankle isn't going to kill me, but these might. Don't worry, you'll get used to them. I broke my knee a few years ago and was on them for what felt like forever. By the third day, I can move freely without them hindering me, which, since you know me, you know how important that is. Great, so I still have 2 days left. Makes me feel so much better. She rolled her eyes. I've told you before, and I'll tell you again, Rennie. Sarcasm does not suit you. Doesn't make it any less effective for releasing frustration, he said, and then pointed at his bed. Yours. With that ankle of yours? Not a chance. You need the space in the bed to be able to stretch out and not aggravate it and make it worse than a sprain. Aggravate it? He said, smirking. She poked him in the chest. Watch yourself, Mr. Highcastle. I have a very good vocabulary when I want to use it. Thank you very much. He grabbed her hand and kissed the back of it. Yes, ma'am. I am not a ma'am yet, by any stretch, she grumbled. It was a testament to the fact he now knew her far too well when he only grinned. Fine, I'll take it tonight. He snagged the neatly folded blanket off the foot of his bed and offered it to her, in case it gets cold. Thanks, Rennie. She accepted it and gave it a curious sniff. He raised an eyebrow. Does it smell like me? Not as much as your other blanket does, she said, hopping over to the couch and spreading the blanket out, catching the pillow he tossed her to. She was tempted to suggest they share his bed, but had to agree at this point she wasn't at all sure how Vladimir might react to such a situation, even if she was fairly certain Sorin wouldn't care. She watched him lean his crutches carefully against the wall and then crawl into bed. Doing the same, she pulled the blanket up and listened to the quiet sounds of the castle, footsteps passing in the hallway and muted voices echoing up through Wren's still-cracked window. Despite the fact it was dead of winter, she didn't expect he would ever shut it again. Wren? She asked into the comfortable silence. His sleepily hummed response made her smile. Thank you. He peeked open an eye and peered at her. She was just able to see it from the moonlight filtering through the window. For what? For letting me stay here. My pleasure, Annie, he said. Only Sorin used to call me that, she said quietly. What was that? Only Sorin used to call me Annie, she told him. After he moved out and before Jax moved in, I could only entice the lad two on occasion and never in front of Edward. Sorin never cared. You were more important to him. She glanced over at him, unable to deny the truth of that, even if she'd never thought of it that way. I guess I was. It's nice to hear from him again. He smiled. Well, I like your full name too, but I'll never stop calling you Annie. Good, she said, settling down and letting her eyes close. I wouldn't want you to. A minute later, she drifted off.